As the room grows quiet, let your thoughts sail away. Many listen quietly here, night after night. If this calm travels with you, you may stay. Subscribing keeps this silence alive. When the city breathes before you do, London does not wake up. It simply continues. Long before your eyes open, before thought has time to form a sentence, the city is already moving in ways that feel practiced, automatic, and faintly indifferent. Somewhere below, carts are rolling, feet are shuffling, animals are complaining about being alive, and people are already late for things they have not yet admitted they are doing every single day of their lives. In the middle of the 18th century, London is not polite enough to wait for you. The city has places to be. It always does. You open your eyes into darkness that is never fully quiet. Even at rest, the city hums, a low mechanical murmur made of breath, movement, and decisions being made without ceremony. The air does not smell like morning. It smells like yesterday continuing without apology. Smoke lingers. Dampness clings. Something organic has been thinking about decomposing for quite some time and has made noticeable progress. This is not a dramatic city. It does not announce itself. It simply exists very close to you. Life here begins early, not because people are ambitious, but because survival prefers a head start. Work does not wait for comfort. Work does not negotiate. It begins when light becomes barely usable, and sometimes before that, just to be safe. London has learned that waiting is inefficient. The streets below are already awake, though awake may be too optimistic a word. They are active. Activity does not require consciousness. It requires repetition, and London repeats itself with extraordinary commitment. People move because they must. They carry things because those things belong somewhere else. They sell objects to people who do not need them urgently, but believe they might soon. This belief keeps the city alive more reliably than optimism ever could. There is no separation between private life and public space. Everything leaks. Sounds, smells, arguments, intentions. Walls are thin, patience thinner. Privacy exists mainly as a theoretical concept discussed by people who do not live here. You learn quickly that London does not reward sensitivity. It rewards awareness. You step carefully, you listen without looking. You avoid anything that seems too interested in you. The city notices hesitation. What makes this place unsettling is not violence or spectacle. It is continuity. Nothing stops, nothing resets. Each day stacks neatly on top of the last, forming a structure so dense that stepping outside it feels unnecessary and faintly irresponsible. And yet within this relentless motion, there is an odd softness. Not kindness exactly, more like accommodation. London makes room for you the way a river makes room for stones. It does not care where you came from. It only cares that you keep moving. Commerce hums through every street. Buying and selling are not events. They are background noise. Money changes hands so often that it becomes less meaningful than the gestures surrounding it. A nod, a pause, a carefully timed silence. These are the real currencies. Everyone here is learning something, how to negotiate, how to endure, how to disappear briefly when necessary, how to belong just enough to avoid notice. London in the 1740s does not promise improvement. It offers possibility, which is more dangerous. Possibility keeps people awake. Possibility convinces them to stay. And so the city breathes long and slow, unconcerned with your comfort, mildly impressed by your persistence, and quietly confident that you will adjust. Most people do. How ordinary lives learn to fit. By the time the sun properly arrives, London has already made most of its important decisions for the day. What remains is execution, not in the dramatic sense. In the practical one, things must be done. People must be somewhere else, shortly. Time moves forward without consulting enthusiasm. For the ordinary residents of the city, life is not measured in milestones. It is measured in distances walked, hours stood, objects counted, and patience spent carefully so it lasts until evening. The body becomes a tool. The mind becomes a schedule. Work fills the day not because it is loved, but because it is reliable. Habits form quickly here. They must. London rewards predictability. You learn which streets move faster in the morning, which corners require attention, which faces are best ignored. This knowledge feels small, but it accumulates into survival. Movement through the city is constant and rarely graceful. There are no clear boundaries between paths and purposes. Everything overlaps. You walk where you can. You stop when you must. You accept that inconvenience is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be managed. Despite this, there is rhythm, a steady, unspoken tempo. Once you learn it, the city becomes less hostile, still demanding but no longer surprised by your presence. Buying and selling continue with calm persistence. Transactions are not rushed, they are tested. Every exchange is a small performance, each participant playing their part with practiced restraint. Nobody believes completely. Everyone pretends convincingly. This constant negotiation teaches subtlety. You learn when to speak, when to wait, when to smile without committing. These are skills as valuable as any trade. As the day fades, the city does not slow so much as change texture. Light softens, noise shifts. The streets remain full, but intentions grow heavier. Fatigue settles into movements. Voices lower slightly, as if everyone has agreed without discussion to conserve what remains. Evening offers something close to rest. Not silence, just reduced urgency. Taverns fill. Conversations repeat. Laughter appears in places where it was not invited earlier. Humor here is dry, observational, and often aimed at the city itself. London encourages irony. It is difficult to take anything too seriously for long when everything insists on continuing regardless. Night brings its own lessons. Darkness reveals how much the city relies on familiarity rather than visibility. You learn to trust memory, to recognize sounds, to accept that certainty is rare and overrated. Eventually you return to whatever space you call yours. It may be shared, it may be temporary, it is sufficient. Sleep arrives not as reward, but as necessity. And as you drift off, the city remains awake enough to be reassuring. It does not watch you. It does not care. It simply exists around you, steady and unresolved, prepared to begin again long before you do. London never promises gentleness, but it offers continuity. And for those who stay long enough, continuity becomes something like belonging. London in the 18th century does not announce itself with grandeur. It does not pause for reflection. It operates quietly, persistently, and with very little concern for individual comfort. By the time most people become aware of their own thoughts, the city has already completed several hours of activity and found that nothing required their participation specifically. This is a place where the day begins before intention, before clarity, before anyone has had time to decide whether they are ready. London does not wait for readiness. It moves on the assumption that people will adapt, because they usually do. The city functions as a system of routines layered over centuries. Each generation adds habits rather than improvements. The result is a living structure that works not because it is elegant, but because it is familiar. Streets remember movement. Markets remember noise. People remember where to stand. Daily life here is not about ambition in the modern sense. It is about placement, knowing where you belong and on the flow, knowing how far you can push before the city pushes back. Ordinary people do not seek recognition. They seek stability, even if that stability arrives disguised as exhaustion. What makes London unsettling is not chaos. It is efficiency without kindness. The city solves problems by absorbing them. Crowds thin by becoming denser elsewhere. Waste disappears by being moved out of sight. Noise becomes background. And yet within this density, opportunity exists. Not loudly, not fairly, but consistently. London rewards endurance more than talent. It notices those who remain. This story is not about famous figures or dramatic turning points. It is about repetition, about ordinary lives adjusting their shape to fit a city that does not adapt in return. It is about how people learn to live inside a place that was already awake, already moving, already decided. Tonight we are not visiting London. We are letting it continue. Waking up inside a smell you can't escape. Waking up inside a smell you can't escape. Morning does not arrive in 18th century London the way it does in stories. It does not come gently, and it does not come with light as its first announcement. Morning arrives through the nose. It arrives as information your body understands before your mind has time to object. You wake not because the sun has risen, but because the air has shifted slightly. A new layer has been added. Smoke that never fully left has decided to linger closer. Something damp has remembered it exists. Somewhere nearby, a human body has begun its day without consulting its neighbors, and the neighbors are now aware of this decision. There is no such thing as a private smell here. Space is too tight for that kind of luxury. Walls are suggestions. Floors transmit sound like gossip. Breath does not stay where it is produced. Everything travels. Especially the parts people would prefer stayed still. Your own body participates without asking permission. You are not separate from the environment. You are one of its more mobile components. Your warmth, your breath, your sweat all blend quietly into the larger system. London does not distinguish between what is human and what is simply present. This is not an attack. The city is not hostile. It is merely thorough in a place where so many lives are stacked close together. Privacy becomes theoretical. You learn this early. You learn it by waking up inside someone else's cooking, someone else's coughing, someone else's unresolved decisions from the night before. You learn that the idea of personal space has not yet arrived in this century, and nobody seems to miss it. Light eventually follows, but it is not in a hurry. When it does appear, it does not clean anything. It simply reveals what has been there all along. Straw mattresses, rough wood, clothing folded because there is nowhere else to put it. Faces that have learned to accept what they see each morning without comment. Outside, the city is already awake in the way machines are awake, functional, repetitive, indifferent to individual timing. Somewhere a cart moves because it must. Somewhere a door opens because it always opens. London does not pause to notice that you are conscious now. The smell deepens rather than changes. It is layered, not replaced. Hoarse, smoke, damp fabric, human persistence. Nothing is wasted here, including discomfort. Everything has a role, and yet there is something oddly stabilizing about this consistency. The smell does not surprise you. It was here yesterday. It will be here tomorrow. In a city that changes quickly in other ways, this continuity feels almost polite. You rise carefully, not because you are fragile, but because the space requires negotiation. Movements are small, practiced, efficient. You learn to exist without excess motion. London appreciates efficiency. It tolerates little else. By the time your feet touch the floor, the day has already begun somewhere else. You are late only if you pretend you are early. The city has been awake for hours, and it is not impressed. The body as part of the city. Living in London means accepting that your body is not entirely yours. It belongs partly to the room, partly to the street, and partly to the slow accumulation of habits required to remain functional. The city does not ask for this arrangement, it assumes it. You wash, if washing is the correct word for moving cold water across skin already familiar with compromise. The water carries its own history. It has visited other hands, other containers, other purposes. It does not apologize. Neither do you. Clothing is selected for endurance rather than expression. Fabrics are worn because they last, not because they please. Nothing here is meant to impress the future. Everything is meant to survive the present. As you dress, sounds filter in from outside. Not announcements, just evidence. Voices overlapping, objects shifting, animals disagreeing with their circumstances. The city communicates continuously but never directly. Stepping outside does not feel like a transition. It feels like joining something that was already happening. The street accepts you the way water accepts rain, briefly, without recognition. Smells intensify, but they no longer require interpretation. Your body has learned their meaning. This one indicates work nearby. That one suggests movement. Another warns you not to linger. London trains the senses efficiently. There is no single source of pollution here because everything contributes. Industry, transport, bodies, weather. Even time itself seems to add weight to the air. The result is not chaos, but density. What is remarkable is how quickly people adapt. The body learns what the mind resists. Breath becomes shallow without effort. Focus narrows. Attention is spent carefully, like money. You do not notice the smell leaving because it never does. You notice yourself adjusting to it. This adjustment is quiet, almost elegant. London rewards those who adapt, without complaint. Despite everything, there is humor here. Dry, observational, often directed at the city itself. People joke not because they are happy, but because humor reduces friction. Sarcasm is a form of lubrication. London does not attack you with its environment. It surrounds you with it. It waits. Eventually, you align. By mid-morning, the smell has become background, not gone, just filed away. This is how the city teaches you to stay. It does not improve conditions, it improves tolerance, and once tolerance settles in, something else appears. Familiarity. Not comfort exactly, but recognition. The air smells like work, like effort, like people doing their best inside circumstances that do not care. That recognition becomes grounding. You know where you are. You know what to expect. The city stops explaining itself and you stop asking. London does not promise cleanliness. It promises continuity. For those who can breathe through it, that is often enough. When the smell becomes home. There comes a moment, usually unnoticed, when the smell stops being an intrusion and becomes a signal, not of decay, but of presence. You realize this only later when you imagine leaving and cannot quite picture the air elsewhere. By evening, the layers have settled into something almost stable. Smoke thins, movement slows, the city exhales without relief. It does not sleep, but it loosens its grip slightly. Your body carries the day quietly. Muscles remember effort. Skin remembers contact. The smell has followed you everywhere, but now it feels less external. It has woven itself into fabric, hair, breath. London has marked you gently. Inside, space remains shared, negotiated, familiar. Others move around you with the ease of people who have learned to coexist without commentary. There is an unspoken agreement not to notice too much. This is where the city reveals its most unsettling quality. Nothing about this feels temporary anymore. The environment has not improved, but your resistance has softened. Adaptation has done its work. You lie down knowing the smell will still be there when you wake. This knowledge does not disturb you. It reassures. The city is consistent, if nothing else. London has not become kind. It has become predictable. For many, that is preferable. As sleep approaches, sounds fade before smells do. The air remains active even as consciousness loosens. Somewhere outside, the city continues its routines. Somewhere nearby, another body breathes in rhythm with yours. This shared atmosphere becomes a quiet bond. You're not alone in this density. Everyone here is breathing the same history, the same persistence, the same refusal to pause. The irony is gentle. A city so crowded teaches solitude through endurance. Privacy is replaced by familiarity, cleanliness by continuity, comfort by survival. And in that exchange, something like belonging emerges. You drift into sleep not because the city has softened, but because you have. The smell remains. It always will. But it no longer demands attention. It simply exists. And so do you. The city that starts working before it thinks. Before light learns its job. In 18th century London, the workday does not begin with intention. It begins with habit, which is faster and far less sentimental. The city does not wait for clarity. It does not wait for comfort. It does not even wait for light. It begins because beginning has proven more reliable than thinking. Long before dawn settles on a decision, movement has already started. Doors open because they always open. Hands reach for familiar tools because those tools were used yesterday and will be used again tomorrow. The city operates on the assumption that readiness is optional. Participation is not. People step into motion without ceremony. There is no moment of reflection where anyone asks whether today should unfold this way. London has answered that question in advance, centuries ago, and has been repeating the answer ever since. Yes, it should. It must. Work arrives quietly, without announcement. It does not knock. It simply appears where bodies already are. Labor here is not driven by emotion or ambition. It is driven by rhythm, a steady pulse that carries everyone forward, whether they are prepared or not. This rhythm does not accelerate, it does not slow, it settles. The early hours belong to repetition. Movement feels automatic, almost borrowed. People work not because they want to, but because stopping would require more explanation than continuing. The city does not encourage explanation. It prefers flow. Darkness lingers, but no one waits for it to leave. Light is useful, but not necessary. Memory guides hands more effectively than sight ever could. Steps are counted, corners are remembered. The body knows where to go before the mind forms a sentence. Productivity here does not feel productive. It feels inevitable. London does not ask if you are tired. It assumes you are and proceeds anyway. Comfort is not part of the calculation. Comfort is a luxury item, available later, if at all. Efficiency comes first. It always has. The street fills with activity that feels calm only because it is familiar. Carts roll, goods are lifted, voices call out information rather than emotion. Nothing is wasted, including effort. Everything is reused, especially energy. There is a faint irony in how little thinking this requires. A city built on commerce, trade, and strategy runs most smoothly when nobody stops to consider why. Thinking interrupts momentum. London cannot afford interruption. Even humor adapts. Jokes are short. Observations are dry. Laughter appears briefly like a pause in breathing, then disappears. This is not joy. It is maintenance. As the sky slowly considers becoming lighter, the city has already completed the most difficult part of its day, beginning. Everything that follows is simply continuation. London does not wake up. It resumes. Labor without conversation. Once the day has begun, London settles into work the way a river settles into its course. There is no discussion about direction, no debate about pace. Everyone moves because movement has been agreed upon long ago, silently, without signatures. Labor in this city is not expressive. It does not care how you feel about it. Your emotions are welcome to exist elsewhere, preferably after dark. During the day, work proceeds, according to rules, written into muscle memory rather than thought. People do not work harder here, they work longer. Duration replaces intensity. Endurance replaces enthusiasm. The city has learned that sustained effort is more reliable than inspired bursts. The remarkable thing is how little attention this requires. Once the rhythm is learned, bodies perform their tasks with minimal instruction. Hands repeat motions so often they no longer belong to the present moment, they belong to habit. The city does not praise this. Praise would slow things down. Instead, London rewards consistency by allowing you to remain part of the system. This is the highest form of approval available. No one asks if you are ready because readiness implies choice. Choice complicates things. London prefers compliance, but not the dramatic kind. Just the quiet, practical kind that looks like cooperation. Productivity arrives long before comfort and stays long after it leaves. Chairs are optional. Rest is negotiated. Stillness is suspicious. If you are standing still, the city assumes you are either lost or finished. Movement continues not because anyone is chasing success, but because stopping feels dangerous. A pause creates questions. Questions require answers. Answers take time. Time is expensive. There is something almost gentle in this efficiency. The city does not demand excellence, it demands adequacy, repeated endlessly. London is not interested in your best. It is interested in your reliable. As the hours pass, work becomes background. The sound of effort blends into the city's ongoing hum. Individual actions dissolve into collective motion. No single task feels significant. Together, they keep everything upright. People adjust themselves to fit this system. Backs bend in familiar ways. Shoulders settle into accepted tension. Breath becomes shallow without complaint. The body learns what the city requires and offers it quietly. Even dissatisfaction becomes muted. There is no time to dwell. Dwelling implies excess attention. Attention is reserved for navigation, not reflection. This is not oppression in the dramatic sense. It is alignment. The city and its people move together, not because they agree, but because resistance would be inefficient. London does not argue. It continues, and by the time the sun fully commits to the sky, the city has already decided that thinking was never the point. When productivity feels normal. There comes a moment, usually unnoticed, when the day's labor stops feeling imposed and begins to feel natural. This is not because the work has become easier, but because the body has learned to cooperate without protest. London relies on this moment. It depends on adaptation. The city does not soften its demands. It waits for you to soften instead. As productivity settles into routine, the edges of effort blur. Work becomes less something you do and more something you are inside. The city surrounds you with purpose until questioning it feels unnecessary. Comfort remains distant but no longer expected. Expectations are heavy. London encourages lightness of mind by discouraging anticipation. You learn to exist inside the present task and nothing else. This is where the city's subtle irony appears. A place obsessed with output gives its people very little space to imagine outcomes. The future is implied, not discussed. Tomorrow looks like today, and today is manageable. There is a strange peace in that repetition, not happiness exactly, but stability. The city offers no guarantees, only continuity. For many, continuity is enough. As the afternoon drifts toward evening, work does not stop so much as loosen. The intensity fades. Movements slow slightly. The city exhales without relief. People carry the day in their bodies. Muscles remember weight. Hands remember texture. Fatigue arrives gently like a familiar companion. Productivity has done its work. Comfort may follow briefly. London never apologizes for starting before you were ready. It does not see the need. The city believes with quiet confidence that you will adjust. And most people do. By nightfall, the day's labor has folded itself neatly into memory. It will return tomorrow unchanged. The city finds this reassuring. You leave the street knowing the city will begin again before you do. This knowledge no longer disturbs you. It steadies. London does not wait for thought. It does not wait for permission. It works. And somehow, without ever being asked, you work with it. Streets designed for survival, not comfort. Where everyone shares the same ground. In 18th-century London, the street is not a place you enter. It is a condition you accept. The moment you step outside, you are no longer an individual moving through space. You are one moving part among many, all sharing the same narrow surface, all pretending, quietly, that this arrangement makes sense. The street was not designed for people. It was designed for everything that needed to pass through at the same time, preferably without stopping, and certainly without complaint. There are no clear boundaries here, no polite separations, no firm agreements about who belongs where. People walk where carts roll, animals wander where people stand. Waste waits wherever gravity allows it to settle. Everyone negotiates with everyone else constantly, but never verbally. The language of the street is movement. Step aside, slow down, speed up, hesitate briefly, then commit. Hesitation is dangerous. Confidence, even borrowed confidence, keeps you upright. Comfort was never part of the design. That would have required foresight, and foresight requires optimism. London prefers practicality. The street must function before it must feel pleasant, and function here means allowing as many bodies, wheels, hooves, barrels, baskets, and intentions as possible to pass through, without complete collapse. Partial chaos is acceptable. Total stoppage is not. You learn quickly that there is no concept of safety in the modern sense. There are no guarantees. There are only habits. You learn where carts tend to swerve. You learn which animals are patient and which are not. You learn which puddles are shallow and which are quietly ambitious. These lessons are not taught. They are absorbed. The street teaches through repetition. Walk it often enough, and your body begins to anticipate danger before your mind has time to react. Feet adjust, shoulders turn, eyes glance without staring. Awareness becomes instinctive, almost musical, a rhythm of avoidance and advance that keeps you moving forward. What surprises newcomers is not the noise, though the noise is considerable. It is the intimacy. Everything is close, too close. Breath mixes, elbows brush. Lives overlap for seconds at a time and then separate forever. The street does not remember faces. It remembers patterns. Eye contact is optional but rarely recommended. Looking directly at someone invites conversation, negotiation, or worse, expectation. Most people master the art of looking without seeing, a skill that serves them well in a city where attention is currency and curiosity can be expensive. The safest gaze is unfocused, alert, without interest. Animals move with more confidence than people. Horses know their importance. Dogs understand their freedom. Pigs, remarkably, behave as if they own the place, which in some neighborhoods they arguably do. They navigate the street with a calm authority that suggests long experience and very few regrets. Waste exists openly without apology. It is part of the street's ecosystem, not an exception to it. Everyone steps around it. No one comments. London does not hide its byproducts. It incorporates them. This honesty, while unsettling, is strangely efficient. And yet within all this disorder, the street works. People arrive where they need to be. Goods reach their destinations. The city continues to feed itself through these shared corridors of motion. Survival, not comfort, is the measure of success. By the time you reach the other end of the street, you realize something quietly important. You did not conquer this space. You cooperated with it. You adjusted your pace, your posture, your expectations. The street allowed you through because you learned its language. London's streets do not welcome you. They tolerate you. And in this city, tolerance is as close to kindness as infrastructure ever gets. Learning to move without being seen. As the day settles into its middle hours, the street does not become calmer. It becomes more practiced. What once felt chaotic now reveals its rules, quiet and firm. The street expects you to learn quickly. It has no patience for confusion. If you are still surprised by it, you are behind. London does not slow down to explain itself. People begin to move with a particular economy of motion, conserving energy in small, careful ways. Steps shorten, turns soften. Bodies angle slightly, as if apologizing in advance for taking up space. This is not courtesy. It is strategy. The street rewards those who can pass through it without disturbing its rhythm. Every surface is shared, but not equally. Carts assume priority without asking. Horses enforce it. People adapt. The hierarchy is clear enough that it no longer needs signs. You learn to read the street the way others read weather. A tightening of movement suggests trouble ahead. A widening indicates temporary mercy. Nothing is permanent. Noise becomes layered rather than loud. Individual sounds matter less than their combination. Wheels on stone, hooves on damp ground, voices raised just enough to be heard, never enough to be memorable. The street hums like a machine that was assembled by many hands over many years, none of whom expected it to be comfortable, only functional. Avoiding eye contact becomes an art form refined through necessity. Looking directly at someone suggests availability of time, of attention, of resources. Most people have none to spare. The safest expression is neutral, alert, uninterested. You see without inviting response. You acknowledge without engaging. The street teaches this gently, then firmly. Children learn it early. They dart, pause, disappear. They understand flow instinctively, slipping between larger bodies with the ease of water finding gaps. Age does not grant advantage here. Awareness does. The street favors the attentive. There is no single danger, only accumulation. A wheel that turns too sharply, an animal startled by nothing in particular, a puddle that hides depth. You learn to scan without staring, to predict without assuming. The street is unforgiving to those who believe they have mastered it completely. What feels unsettling at first slowly becomes familiar. Not safe, but known. The absence of safety stops being frightening once you stop expecting it. In its place arrives a quieter confidence, built from repetition rather than reassurance. You have walked this stretch before. You survived it. That is evidence enough. The city does not protect you from the street. It expects you to protect yourself by paying attention. This expectation is never stated, only demonstrated daily. Those who fail to learn disappear from your awareness quickly, folded into the street's ongoing motion. Despite everything, there is a strange intimacy here. Lives brush past each other for brief moments, close enough to share breath, warmth, and intent. These encounters leave no trace, but they create a sense of shared endurance. Everyone here is navigating the same space, the same constraints, the same compromises. Humor appears in fragments, a muttered comment, a raised eyebrow, a shared glance when a cart blocks everything and nothing can be done about it. Laughter, when it comes, is brief and efficient, a release valve open just long enough to prevent frustration from becoming costly. By afternoon, the street feels less like an obstacle and more like a current. You no longer fight it. You enter it. Movement becomes cooperation. Survival becomes routine. And in that routine, the street reveals its true function. It does not connect places. It trains people. It teaches them how to exist together without agreement, without comfort, and without stopping. London's streets are not cruel. They are honest. They do not promise ease. They offer passage, conditional and temporary, to anyone willing to learn the rules by walking them. When familiarity replaces safety, by the time evening begins to loosen its grip on the street, something subtle has changed. Not the street itself. The stones remain hard. The air remains crowded. The movement remains constant. What changes is you. The street no longer feels like a test. It feels like a pattern you have learned to step into without thinking. This is how London works. It does not make its streets safer. It makes its people more adaptable. Comfort never arrives, but competence does, and competence is quietly persuasive. You stop flinching at every sound. You stop tensing at every movement. Not because danger has disappeared, but because you have learned how to live alongside it without engaging. The street at dusk feels heavier, slower, as if the day has left its weight behind. Bodies carry fatigue openly now. Movements become deliberate rather than hurried. The urgency of survival softens into the patience of endurance. People still move carefully, but with less resistance, like travelers who know the road will not change and have stopped wishing it would. Light fades unevenly. Shadows gather in familiar places. The street does not hide what it is. It simply becomes harder to read. Those who know it well continue without hesitation. Those who do not hesitate anyway, hoping familiarity will come quickly. Sometimes it does. Eye contact remains rare, but glances linger a fraction longer. Recognition does not require conversation. A shared understanding passes silently between strangers who have spent the day navigating the same ground. There is a quiet respect in that shared effort, understated and unspoken. The street has not become kind, but it has become predictable. That predictability offers its own form of calm. You know where the carts will slow. You know which corners demand attention. You know when to stop moving and when to commit fully. These small pieces of knowledge add up to something like belonging. What once felt like chaos now feels dense with information. The street is full, not disordered. Every sound has context. Every movement has precedent. Even the waste and debris feel placed, familiar obstacles rather than threats. The city does not clean its streets to reassure you. It lets you grow accustomed instead. There is a gentle irony in this adaptation. The street never adjusts to you. You adjust to it so thoroughly that the difference feels natural. What once required focus now happens instinctively. Your body carries the knowledge forward without effort. As night settles in, the street does not empty. It shifts. The day's labor gives way to evening's persistence. People return from wherever they were required, carrying with them the accumulated patience of the hours before. The street receives them without comment. You move through it now with a quieter confidence, not arrogance, not certainty, just familiarity. The absence of safety no longer feels alarming. It feels expected. An expectation in a city like this is grounding. London's streets were never meant to be pleasant. They were meant to function, to move people and goods and waste and intention through limited space without stopping the city itself. They succeed not because they are well designed, but because people learn how to live inside their limitations. By the time you reach your door, the street releases you without ceremony. Tomorrow it will do the same thing in the same way, without remembering you. This thought does not disturb you anymore. It comforts. The street does not know your name, it knows your movement, and that in London is enough. Commerce as a daily performance. The stage that opens every morning. In 18th-century London, commerce does not begin with enthusiasm. It begins with positioning. Before the first serious transaction takes place, before money changes hands or voices rise into negotiation, the city is already arranging itself like a stage that has been used so often it no longer needs rehearsal. Stalls appear where they always appear. Goods are placed where eyes are most likely to fall. People take their positions with the calm familiarity of performers who know their roles by heart. Buying and selling here is not an event. It is a daily performance repeated so consistently that it becomes invisible to those inside it. The market does not open with ceremony. It simply resumes as if it had been paused overnight out of politeness rather than necessity. London never forgets where it left off. Every transaction carries a rhythm that has little to do with fairness and even less to do with value. Price is not a reflection of worth. It is a reflection of skill. How well someone reads the moment. How accurately they judge the other person's patience. How convincingly they perform certainty. In this city, confidence often sells better than quality, and hesitation is more expensive than dishonesty. Sellers learn early that goods alone are not enough. Presentation matters, timing matters, expression matters. A smile offered too soon looks desperate. A smile offered too late looks insincere. The most effective smile arrives precisely when the buyer begins to doubt their own position. This is not deception so much as choreography. Buyers, for their part, arrive prepared to perform as well. They practice skepticism. They rehearse indifference. They learn the power of walking away slowly, of pausing at the edge of a stall, just long enough to suggest restraint. Even when they want something deeply, they learn to want it quietly. Desire expressed openly weakens negotiation. The street itself supports this performance. Noise provides cover, crowds offer anonymity. No one transaction draws too much attention because there are too many happening at once. Success here is not dramatic. It is incremental, achieved through repetition rather than triumph. What makes this daily exchange unsettling is how natural it feels. Children observe it without being taught. Apprentices absorb it through correction rather than instruction. There are no manuals, only examples. Everyone watches everyone else learning what works by seeing what continues. The market does not reward honesty. It rewards consistency. A seller who overcharges but does so predictably is trusted more than one who occasionally offers fairness. Reliability becomes a form of virtue. Buyers adapt accordingly, adjusting expectations rather than protesting principles. There is humor in this, though it is rarely loud. A raised eyebrow, a muttered comment after a successful bargain, a shared glance between strangers who Both know exactly what just happened and agree not to acknowledge it. London's commerce runs on these quiet recognitions. The performance repeats itself day after day, not because anyone enjoys it, but because it works. The city feeds itself through this ongoing theater of exchange, and everyone involved understands that the play must go on, even if no one remembers how it began. By midday, countless small victories have already been declared privately. Buyers convince themselves they have won. Sellers quietly do the same. Both walk away, satisfied enough to return tomorrow, which is the only outcome the city truly requires. Commerce here does not seek resolution. It seeks continuity. And in London, continuity is success. The quiet art of thinking you won. As the day moves forward, the market settles into its most convincing illusion: balance. Nothing is balanced, of course, but it appears that way to those who need to believe the exchange was fair enough to justify returning. Buyers leave stalls with packages in hand and reassurance in mind. Sellers remain behind with lighter inventories and the same reassurance. Both sides walk away satisfied, which is the market's most important product. This satisfaction is carefully constructed. Buyers do not measure success by accuracy, but by feeling. If they believe they have secured something at a better price than expected, the performance has succeeded. Whether this belief aligns with reality is irrelevant. Reality does not repeat itself daily with such reliability. Belief does. The experienced buyer understands this instinctively. They know that the goal is not to uncover the true value of an object, but to leave the exchange with dignity intact. A purchase made too easily feels suspicious. A purchase made with visible effort feels earned. The market provides just enough resistance to make victory feel plausible. Sellers understand this just as well. They rarely offer their best terms immediately. That would end the performance too quickly. Instead, they allow the buyer to struggle slightly, to negotiate, to retreat and return. This dance is not adversarial. It is cooperative. Though neither side would describe it that way aloud, the street supports this shared fiction. The noise, the movement, the constant presence of other negotiations nearby all reinforce the sense that something important is happening everywhere at once. No single exchange matters enough to pause the flow. The city prefers momentum to accuracy. There is a gentle irony in how seriously everyone takes this process, while pretending not to care. Buyers affect indifference. Sellers affect patience. Both invest significant emotional energy in appearing unaffected. The performance requires restraint more than passion. Occasionally, a transaction fails. A buyer walks away. A seller refuses to adjust. These moments feel dramatic only because they interrupt the rhythm. The market absorbs them quickly. Someone else steps in. Another exchange begins. Continuity resumes. By afternoon, faces look familiar. Not because people remember names, but because expressions repeat. The same cautious optimism. The same practiced doubt. The same quiet satisfaction at the end of a deal. Commerce trains its participants well. There is no moral conclusion here. The market does not reward virtue or punish deception. It rewards participation. Those who refuse to play simply disappear from relevance. The city notices absence more than protest. Humor surfaces again in small doses. A buyer boasts quietly to a companion. A seller shakes their head after a particularly dramatic negotiation. These moments are not mocking. They are affectionate. Everyone recognizes the performance for what it is, and everyone agrees to continue anyway. By the time the sun begins its slow decline, the market has accomplished its real task. It has convinced enough people that tomorrow is worth returning for. This promise, unspoken and unexamined, keeps the city moving forward. When the performance feels like home. As evening approaches, the market does not close so much as loosen. Transactions become fewer, slower, less precise. The urgency of negotiation softens into something almost reflective. Sellers rearrange what remains. Buyers linger without intention. The performance winds down without ever officially ending. This is when commerce reveals its most unsettling quality. After a full day of negotiation, performance, and quiet calculation, the system feels natural. Not forced, not artificial, natural. People have spent hours playing roles so familiar that removing them would feel disruptive. The city depends on this feeling. When performance becomes habit, habit becomes identity. A seller is not merely someone who sells. A buyer is not merely someone who purchases. These roles settle into posture, tone, expectation. They shape how people move through the street, even when they are not negotiating. London does not ask whether this is healthy. It asks whether it works. And it does. As stalls begin to thin and voices lower, there is a shared understanding that the day has been successful enough. No one tallies totals publicly. Success is measured privately, emotionally, in the quiet reassurance that tomorrow will resemble today closely enough to manage. The market leaves traces behind: scuffed stone, faded chalk marks, the lingering sense of having participated in something larger than oneself without ever being fully seen. These traces are not cleaned away. They become part of the street's memory. People depart carrying goods, but also stories. Not dramatic stories, small ones. How a price was lowered, how a look was misread, how a hesitation paid off. These stories are told later, casually, as evidence of competence rather than accomplishment. There is comfort in this repetition. The performance offers structure in a city that rarely pauses to explain itself. Even those who complain about commerce rely on its predictability. Knowing where to stand, what to say, and how to appear matters more than understanding why. By nightfall, the street grows quieter, but the logic of the market remains active. It will return in the morning, unchanged, ready to repeat the same exchanges with the same patience. London trusts what repeats. Commerce here is not greedy. It is persistent. It does not rush toward expansion. It maintains itself through daily rehearsal, through people willing to play their parts, convincingly enough to believe in them. As you leave the street behind, the performance releases you gently. Tomorrow, it will invite you back, without invitation. You will return not because you must, but because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. In London, buying and selling are not merely transactions. They are the city speaking to itself every day in a language it understands perfectly. And when the performance ends for the night, the city rests not satisfied, but prepared to begin again, before anyone thinks to ask whether it should. The city that moves on water when land fails. When the river became London's real road. London discovered very early on that land was a polite suggestion rather than a reliable solution. Streets existed, of course, but they were never truly designed to cooperate. They narrowed unexpectedly, flooded without apology, stalled under the combined weight of carts, animals, people, and everything those people were carrying. The city did not fix this problem so much as sidestep it. When movement on land became an argument, London turned quietly toward the river and let water do what stone could not. The Thames did not offer comfort, it did not offer cleanliness. What it offered was continuity. While streets argued with gravity and congestion, the river simply kept going. Boats slid where wheels locked, goods moved where feet hesitated. Time behaved differently on water, smoothing itself into a steady forward motion that did not require negotiation. London noticed this and adjusted its habits accordingly. For ordinary people, the river was less a scenic feature and more a functional necessity. It was the city's most honest infrastructure. No signage, no promises, just movement. If something needed to arrive, the river was faster. If something needed to leave, the river was willing. The water accepted cargo, waste, passengers, and mistakes with the same indifferent patience. This was not ignorance. Everyone knew how dirty the river was. The smell alone made that impossible to ignore. But cleanliness was a luxury London could not afford to prioritize. Survival came first. Efficiency followed closely behind. Hygiene waited somewhere further down the list, quietly understanding it would not be consulted today. Traveling by river required a different relationship with the body. Balance mattered more than comfort. Awareness replaced ease. You sat where you were told, held what you were given, and trusted the person guiding the boat to understand the current better than you did. This trust was not sentimental. It was practical. Watermen learned their trade the way others learned streets, through repetition, error, and survival. There was danger here, always present but rarely dramatized. People fell in, boats struck each other, some journeys ended without their passengers. These facts were acknowledged with brief expressions of concern before being folded back into routine. The river did not pause for tragedy, and London followed its example. What made the river remarkable was not its reliability, but its refusal to moralize. It did not care who you were, where you came from, or what you carried. It responded only to weight, direction, and momentum. In a city obsessed with status, this neutrality felt almost radical. The Thames also served as a moving display of the city's contradictions. Wealth passed within arm's reach of hunger. Fine goods floated by people who could never afford them. The river did not redistribute opportunity. It simply revealed it repeatedly, day after day, tide after tide. London learned to build its expectations around this. Streets were endured. The river was used. When delays happened on land, they were accepted with resignation. When delays happened on water, they felt personal, almost offensive, because the river was supposed to work, and most of the time it did. There was a quiet humor in how much the city depended on something it openly mistreated. Waste flowed into the same current that carried food, fabric, fuel, and news. The river absorbed all of it without complaint, continuing to function long after it should have been overwhelmed. London took this resilience for granted, as cities often do with the things that keep them alive. By the time evening approached, boats still moved. The pace slowed, but the logic remained intact. Water did not rest just because people did. The river prepared for the next day without instruction, confident that London would once again rely on it when land inevitably failed. In this way, the Thames was not merely part of the city. It was the city's alternative nervous system, carrying signals and supplies through channels that refused to clog. London slept, knowing that even if streets surrendered to chaos again tomorrow, the river would remember how to move. The river that carries what the city cannot hold. As the day stretches onward, the river becomes busier without ever appearing hurried. Boats pass in steady rhythms, each one carrying something the city has decided not to carry itself. Barrels, bundles, crates, people, messages, rumors, leftovers from yesterday and promises for tomorrow. The river accepts all of it without commentary. It does not separate the useful from the unpleasant. It does not ask what should stay and what should go. It moves everything equally, and that equality is what makes it valuable. On land, movement requires negotiation. Someone must yield, someone must wait, someone must be slightly annoyed. On water, negotiation happens earlier, quietly, through experience. The boatman adjusts before the passenger complains. The current corrects mistakes before they become arguments. This creates a strange calm, even in danger. The river is not safe, but it is predictable, and predictability feels close enough to comfort to be trusted. People learn to measure distance differently once they rely on water. Streets stretch, turns confuse. Time dissolves into stops and delays. The river shortens everything. Neighborhoods that feel distant on foot become familiar by boat. The city folds in on itself along the current, becoming smaller without becoming simpler. There is a physical intimacy to river travel that land rarely allows. You sit close, you smell each other, you share space without pretending otherwise. Privacy dissolves quickly on water, but no one seems offended by this. The river has already stripped away the illusion of separation. You are here together, moving forward, whether you like it or not. Danger remains, but it is not theatrical. The river does not threaten. It simply waits for inattention. A careless step, a misjudged tide, a moment of distraction, and the water takes what it is offered. London understands this quietly. The city does not dramatize loss on the river. It absorbs it. Names disappear. Routes continue. This absorption is part of the system's efficiency. Grief is allowed, but briefly. Movement matters more. The city survives not by remembering everything, but by continuing anyway. The river teaches this lesson daily, patiently, without emphasis. Commerce thrives in this environment. Goods move faster than sympathy. Information flows more freely than concern. Prices adjust to tides rather than emotions. The river carries not just objects, but decisions made elsewhere, consequences arriving gently, almost politely, at unfamiliar docks. And still, despite all of this, there is something soothing about the motion. The sound of water against wood, the slow rhythm of oars, the sense that forward movement does not require effort, only balance. Londoners do not romanticize this feeling, but they recognize it. They rely on it when the city feels too heavy to push through on foot. By late afternoon, the river has already done more work than most streets will manage all day. It has carried burdens without complaint, solved problems without ceremony, and prepared itself to do the same again tomorrow. The city, in return, continues to treat it as both essential and expendable, trusting that the water will not take offense. When dirty water becomes a clean solution. As evening settles, the river does not slow so much as soften. The traffic thins, the voices fade, the water keeps moving quieter now, but no less purposeful. London steps back from the edge and allows the river to finish what it started. At night, the Thames becomes almost anonymous. Its work continues mostly unseen. Quiet crossings, late deliveries, subtle movements that keep the city from collapsing into stillness. The river does not demand recognition. It does not require gratitude. It operates best when ignored. There is an irony here that London never fully addresses. The same water that carries waste also carries survival. The same current that smells of decay delivers food, fuel, and fabric. Clean systems would be preferable, but preferable is not the same as possible. The city chooses what works. Efficiency in London has never depended on elegance. It depends on repetition. The river repeats itself faithfully. Tides rise and fall, boats come and go. The logic remains intact. When land fails, water remembers how to move. People sleep knowing this, whether they articulate it or not. The river becomes part of the city's background assurance. Streets may flood, markets may stall, arguments may stretch longer than patience allows, but the water will continue to carry things where they need to go. This reliance shapes behavior subtly. Londoners plan with the river in mind. They adjust expectations. They forgive delays more easily when they know an alternative exists. The river offers a second option, and second options feel like security. There is no affection in this relationship, but there is respect. Not admiration. Respect. The kind that comes from knowing exactly how much you depend on something you do not fully control. As you move away from the water and back into the city's narrower spaces, the river lingers in the background, still working, still carrying, still solving problems, without asking to be noticed. London does not thank it. London simply expects it to be there. And tomorrow, before the streets begin arguing again, the river will already be moving, ready to take on the weight of a city that learned long ago not to trust land alone. Where information travels faster than people. Words that leave before feet do. In Georgian London, distance was a real thing for the body and a mostly imaginary thing for news. Your legs could be delayed by mud, crowds, carts, and the simple fact that a city built for commerce was not built for your personal comfort. But a sentence could cross that same city on nothing more than breath. London held 500,000 people, and nearly all of them were capable of repeating something they had heard 5 minutes ago with the confidence of a sworn witness. It was not a flaw in the system. It was the system doing what it always did, moving the most valuable cargo without paying for wagons. Paper existed, and so did printers, and so did official announcements, but paper was expensive and slow. Ink had to be paid for. Type had to be set. Sheets had to dry. Speech skipped the middle steps. Knowing something early mattered more than knowing it well. If you heard about a ship arriving before your competitor did, you could buy its cargo before prices rose. If you heard that a neighborhood was restless before the watch did, you could avoid the alley that would soon become a trap. If you heard that a master was in a sour mood before you stepped into the shop, you could adjust your face into something useful and harmless. None of this required the news to be perfectly true. It only required the news to arrive early enough to shape your next move. That was why the city's first question was rarely, "Is it true?" The first question was, "Have you heard?" Truth arrived later, after money had already moved. This created a particular kind of listening. You did not listen like a scholar weighing evidence. You listened like someone trying to stay upright in a moving crowd. Your ears became practical. They caught keywords rather than arguments. Fire, fever, price, riot, auction, arrest. You stored them the way you stored coins, not as decoration but as options. London was loud, but within the noise there were patterns. And if you learned those patterns, you could move before the crush arrived. The city trained messengers without admitting it. Apprentices carried parcels and gossip. Porters delivered crates and rumors. Watermen ferried passengers and updates. London's information network was built from ordinary mouths doing ordinary work. There was a darker convenience in this speed. News traveled faster than responsibility. A rumor could ruin a shop before anyone proved it wrong. A hint of scandal could stain a name long enough to become profitable for someone else. The city shrugged at this because the city shrugged at most things that did not physically block the street. If it did not halt trade, it became background. By evening, shouting softened. But information did not stop, it simply lowered its voice. A confident tone became its own evidence. Calm suggested control, and control suggested profit. London admired calm even when it was only good presentation. Coffee houses. The first social network with worse lighting. If streets were where bodies collided, coffee houses were where opinions did. They were not quiet places, but they were quieter than markets, and that made them dangerous in a different way. Noise in the street announced itself. Noise in a coffee house gathered. It clustered, moved, and then broke apart to reform elsewhere. A cup of coffee bought entry, not refreshment. What mattered was the room. You could sit for hours pretending to read while actually listening. You could watch faces change when a ship was mentioned, when a name surfaced, when confidence shifted shape. The coffee house did not distribute information. It taught you how information behaved. Here the city learned to speed up without moving faster. Men who had not walked a mile all day could still shift prices with a sentence. A single report, true, half-true, or carefully inflated, could ripple outward. Someone read aloud from a paper, and calculations began before the paragraph ended. Plans rearranged themselves quietly. It was commerce performed as conversation. Runners slipped in and out with names and numbers. Insurance men gathered in corners remembering storms, and captains with alarming precision. Precision sounded expensive, and in London, expensive-sounding ideas were trusted. If you listened carefully, you noticed the miracle was not that news arrived, but that it arrived with an invisible price. Everyone paid differently. Some paid with money, some with access, some with silence. London preferred subtle transactions. Information was bent through emphasis, omission, and tone. If you knew a ship was late, you blamed the wind. If you knew prices would rise, you insisted they would fall. The goal was not education. The goal was movement. This was a city where confidence traveled faster than correction, and by the time facts arrived, opinions had already settled. There was quiet comedy in watching grown men become poetic about sugar or tobacco, as if barrels were sensitive creatures deserving sympathy. Lost cargo produced real tears, not from tragedy but arithmetic. Someone called it misfortune. Someone else called it a lesson. Everyone agreed someone should have paid the insurance. Coffee houses manufactured reputations. A man who spoke well became a source. A man who spoke rarely, but precisely, became dangerous. Authority here was not official. It was social, constructed from timing and calm delivery. London bought calm the way it bought fine cloth. Knowledge as a commodity, not a virtue. London never treated knowledge as sacred. It treated it as practical. Information existed to be spent, not preserved. Hoarding it too long risked spoilage. Sharing it carefully increased influence. Sharing it carelessly created noise. Vanity fueled the system efficiently. Telling someone news before anyone else bought you a small moment of power, which could later be spent as a favor, an introduction, or a softened price. London ran on these invisible exchanges as much as it ran on coins. This created an uneven landscape. Those with access shaped events, those without reacted. Paper might record history later, but speech decided who benefited in the moment. London accepted this imbalance as normal. Knowledge was not meant to enlighten everyone. It was meant to move faster than competitors. Ideals slowed things down. Efficiency did not. At night, conversation softened, but did not stop. Information rested lightly, ready to be repeated in the morning. Bodies slept. Words waited. Living in constant early warning carried a cost. Your mind rarely rested. Every conversation felt like a message. Every pause hinted at meaning. Some coped by pretending not to care, wearing indifference like armor. Others drowned the noise in more noise, staying late where talk blurred. A few learned to let most information drift past, keeping only what mattered. At night, when streets quieted, information condensed. It waited between sentences, ready for dawn. If there was a lesson, it was not moral. London did not offer morals gently. The lesson was simple. In a crowded city, knowledge was not decoration. It was a tool. It opened doors invisible to those who arrived late. In Georgian London, arriving late was not inconvenience. It was the difference between watching history happen and having it happen to you. Listening then became the gentlest form of survival. Nightlife, where exhaustion pretends to relax. When darkness does not mean rest. In 18th century London, night does not arrive with permission, and it certainly does not arrive to offer rest. Darkness falls because the sun leaves, not because the city agrees to stop. What changes after sunset is not the pace of life, but the tone. Daytime labor loosens its grip just enough for something else to take its place, something quieter, but no less demanding. Night in London is not an ending, it is a shift change. People do not retreat indoors to recover so much as they drift sideways into different forms of activity. The body is tired, yes, but tiredness does not guarantee sleep. It only guarantees a desire to feel different. Night provides that difference. The noise softens but does not disappear. The streets remain active, though movement becomes less purposeful and more habitual, as if people are following paths learned by repetition rather than intention. There is an illusion that night is gentler. Shadows blur edges, voices lower, lamps flicker with a kind of courtesy daylight, never offered, but the city itself does not become kinder. It simply becomes less visible. Hazards remain exactly where they were. Opportunities do too. The difference is that judgment grows slower and London notices. Those who worked all day do not suddenly become carefree at night. They become selective. Energy is rationed. Attention narrows. Entertainment is chosen not for joy but for distraction. Nightlife does not promise happiness. It promises interruption, a pause, in the constant awareness required to survive the day. The city understands this need and provides accordingly. Taverns glow, music leaks into alleys, laughter appears, sometimes genuine, often practiced. London does not demand sincerity after dark. It accepts performance. Entertainment as controlled forgetting. Nighttime entertainment in London is not an escape from reality so much as a negotiated truce with it. Taverns, music rooms, and crowded gathering spaces offer a temporary suspension of consequence, carefully measured so that the city does not lose control. People drink not to celebrate, but to soften the sharp edges of memory and anticipation. Alcohol does not create joy here. It slows thought just enough to make endurance feel optional. Conversations repeat themselves. Stories grow familiar. Arguments circle without resolution. This repetition is comforting. It requires little effort. The mind, exhausted from calculation and caution, welcomes anything that asks less of it. Songs do not need to be good. Jokes do not need to be new. Familiarity does the work. There is a quiet irony in how disciplined this indulgence remains. Excess is visible, but not admired. Losing control entirely invites attention, and attention after dark is rarely beneficial. Most people drink with an understanding of limits, stopping short of collapse, aiming instead for dullness. A softened awareness is safer than complete absence. Night gatherings also serve another purpose. Information continues to move, but more slowly, more sloppily. Rumors loosen, confessions slip out sideways. Promises are made with reduced conviction. The city listens carefully during these hours, because exhaustion reveals what caution hides. London does not mistake this for intimacy. It is simply another mode of exchange. Words spoken at night carry different weight, heavier in feeling, lighter in consequence. By morning, much of it will be forgotten or forgiven. The city counts on that. A city that never becomes kind. As night deepens, the city grows quieter but not safer. Lamps create islands of light surrounded by uncertainty. Streets empty unevenly. Some areas pulse with sound while others hold their breath. Movement becomes deliberate again, guided by instinct rather than schedule. London at night rewards those who know where they are going and punishes those who look uncertain. Sleep arrives unevenly. Some collapse early, bodies surrendering without negotiation. Others remain awake long after they should, minds circling the same thoughts with reduced resistance. Night magnifies what day distracts from. Worries feel larger, regrets feel closer, entertainment fades, leaving only the self and the city, neither particularly forgiving. And yet there is something honest about these hours. Without the pressure to produce or perform usefulness, people reveal what remains when effort runs out. Sometimes it is kindness, sometimes bitterness. Often it is simple fatigue, worn openly without apology. London does not comfort this exhaustion. It observes it. The city has learned that people adapt better when not coddled. Night is not designed to heal, it is designed to pass. When morning arrives, it will demand participation again, regardless of how gently or harshly the night unfolded. So the city waits, taverns dim, voices trail off, lamps burn lower. London rests not because it is peaceful, but because it has learned to pause without stopping. Night does not soften the city. It simply gives it a different face. And in that face, tired, familiar, and quietly unkind, London remains exactly what it was during the day, awake, watching, and already preparing to begin again. when fatigue becomes the common language. As the night continues, exhaustion becomes the only thing everyone truly shares. It smooths over differences that daylight insists on highlighting. Wealth, status, ambition, all of it softens under the same weight of tired bodies and slowed reactions. People stop performing improvement and settle into maintenance. This is not rest. It is suspension, a temporary holding pattern where effort is reduced but never fully abandoned. You can see it in posture. Shoulders drop, steps shorten, conversations lose their sharp edges. People speak less to convince and more to fill the space between silences. Night removes the pressure to progress. It replaces it with the quieter pressure to endure until morning. This shared fatigue creates brief moments of tolerance, not kindness exactly, but allowance. Minor irritations are ignored. Small offenses slide past unchallenged. Everyone understands instinctively that there is not enough energy left for conflict. London does not become friendlier at night. It becomes less demanding. Time stretches strangely during these hours. Without schedules to obey, minutes blur. Taverns remain open not because people are still enjoying themselves, but because closing them would require effort. Music continues at a volume just low enough to be endured. Laughter arrives late, delayed, sometimes unsure why it appeared at all. Nightlife, in this sense, is not celebration. It is management, a way of guiding large numbers of exhausted people through the final hours of the day without forcing them into stillness they are not ready for. The city understands that abrupt silence can be more unsettling than noise. Alcohol as a temporary negotiation. Drink plays its role with quiet efficiency. It does not transform personalities, it slows them. Sharp thoughts lose their urgency. Worries widen but soften at the edges. Alcohol does not erase memory. It dulls anticipation, which is often more useful. Most people drink not to feel good, but to feel less alert. Alertness is expensive. It requires attention, judgment, restraint. After a long day, these become liabilities rather than strengths. The drink offers permission to let them go temporarily. London understands moderation even when it pretends not to. Collapse is inconvenient. Someone who drinks too much draws attention, and attention after dark rarely leads to improvement. So people learn their limits. They drink enough to blur the city, not enough to disappear inside it. Stories repeat. Old arguments resurface. Familiar jokes earn familiar responses. This repetition is part of the comfort. Nothing new is required. Nothing must be solved. The night is not a place for progress. It is a place for pause. Information still moves here, but imperfectly. Confessions slip out sideways. Promises are made with reduced clarity. By morning, many of these words will dissolve, remembered vaguely or not at all. London allows this. Forgetting is part of recovery, even if the city never calls it that. The city after most eyes close. As the night deepens further, activity thins but does not vanish. Those still awake move with a different awareness. Streets feel wider but also more exposed. Lamps cast uneven light, shadows stretch. The city reveals gaps that daylight keeps hidden. This is when London feels most honest. Without crowds to soften its edges, the city stands plainly. Stone remains hard. Air remains heavy. The absence of noise does not create peace. It creates clarity. Some people finally sleep, surrendering completely. Others remain suspended between rest and thought, drifting without direction. Night magnifies whatever is left unfinished. The city does not intervene. It lets thoughts wander until they exhaust themselves. For those still moving, night rewards familiarity, knowing which streets to avoid, which lights to trust, which silences are harmless. These matter more now than during the day. London at night does not forgive mistakes more easily. It simply gives fewer warnings. And yet even here the city does not feel hostile. It feels indifferent. Indifference, after a long day, can be calming. Nothing is demanded, nothing is explained. You are allowed to exist without purpose for a few hours. Morning waiting patiently. Eventually, without announcement, night begins to loosen its hold. Not because the city has rested enough, but because repetition requires a reset. Taverns dim further. Conversations trail off. Bodies drift toward whatever passes for home. London does not end the night cleanly. It lets it fade. Sleep arrives unevenly, imperfectly, but sufficiently. The city accepts this. It has learned that perfection slows things down. Morning will come soon, whether anyone is ready or not. Work will resume. Attention will sharpen. Night will be folded away without ceremony. Its purpose served not by joy, but by survival. In this way, nightlife in London is not an escape from the day. It is the day, slowed just enough to be endured again tomorrow. Exhaustion pretends to relax, and the city allows the performance, knowing it will not last. And when the first sounds of morning begin to stir, London is already awake beneath them, unchanged, unkind, and entirely prepared to begin again. Public lessons the city never explains. Events that do not ask to be understood. In 18th century London, some events are not meant to be explained. They appear, occupy space, and then withdraw, leaving behind a quiet understanding that explanation was never the point. The city does not pause to interpret itself. It presents. What people do with what they see is their responsibility. These moments are not introduced with speeches or conclusions. They happen in public, where anyone can witness them without invitation. The lack of commentary is intentional. Words soften meaning. Images endure. London knows this instinctively. A crowd gathers not because it is instructed to learn, but because learning happens automatically when something is seen often enough. The city does not insist on attention. It relies on repetition. A single image encountered once may shock. The same image encountered regularly becomes instruction. What is unsettling is how little detail is required. Precision is unnecessary. Ambiguity does the work more efficiently. People fill in gaps themselves, and what they imagine often lasts longer than what could be clarified. London trusts this process. It does not explain its lessons because explanation invites debate. Debate slows order. The city prefers recognition over understanding. The crowd as a classroom. Crowds in London do not gather solely out of curiosity. They gather because humans learn by watching each other respond. A reaction spreads faster than a reason. If people around you grow quiet, you grow quiet. If they avert their eyes, you learn where not to look. This is how the city teaches. Not through instruction, but through shared behavior. The crowd becomes a mirror, reflecting acceptable reactions back to itself. No one needs to be told what to feel. Feeling emerges collectively, shaped by proximity and silence. Children absorb these lessons early. They watch faces more than events. They learn which moments deserve laughter, which demand stillness, which require forgetting immediately afterward. The city does not protect them from seeing. It assumes exposure is educational. There is a subtle efficiency in this method. One event instructs thousands. No repetition is required beyond memory. The lesson lingers not because it is reinforced, but because it was never articulated. Unspoken rules settle deeper. London understands that people remember what they are allowed to witness without guidance. It lets the crowd do the teaching. Images that stand in for order. The city uses images the way it uses architecture, not to inspire, but to contain. Certain sites exist to remind rather than explain. They occupy public space with deliberate neutrality. No emotion is requested, only acknowledgement. These images are rarely dramatic. Drama fades too quickly. Instead, they are ordinary, placed where they cannot be avoided, encountered during routines rather than special occasions. The power lies in their integration into daily life. London does not linger on detail. Detail invites sympathy, interpretation, and distraction. The city prefers outline, shape, position, enough to register, not enough to linger over. The lesson is simple. This exists, and therefore something is expected of you. People adjust behavior quietly afterward, not because they feel threatened, but because the image has joined the background of their understanding. Order is maintained not through fear alone, but through familiarity. This method is unsettling precisely because it feels calm. Nothing dramatic needs to happen today. What matters is that everyone remembers what could happen. Memory without narrative. What the city teaches publicly is rarely discussed afterward. Conversations slide around it. References remain indirect. Names are avoided. This is not denial. It is efficiency. Turning memory into narrative weakens its utility. London prefers memory without story. A remembered image requires no retelling. It simply sits, available when needed. People carry it quietly, adjusting decisions without consciously recalling why. This produces a city that appears emotionally restrained. Reactions are measured, expressions controlled, not because people feel less, but because they have learned when expression is unnecessary. The city does not need enthusiasm for order. It needs compliance. Compliance is easier when people believe they arrived at it themselves. Silence supports this belief beautifully. By refusing to explain, London allows its residents to participate in maintaining structure without feeling coerced. The lesson feels internal rather than imposed. Seeing once, remembering forever. As time passes, these public lessons fade into the texture of the city. They are no longer noticed consciously, but they remain active. Like architecture, they shape movement without demanding attention. Newcomers sense something before they understand it. Longtime residents move with confidence born of recognition rather than knowledge. The city does not correct them. It lets experience refine them. London never announces that a lesson has ended. It simply stops presenting it as often. Memory fills the gap. The city trusts memory to finish the work. And so order persists without constant reinforcement. Not because people are watched continuously, but because they remember having watched once. That is enough. In this way, London teaches publicly, without ever speaking. It does not explain itself because explanation is fragile, images endure, silence repeats, order settles in quietly. The city remains calm, not because it is gentle, but because it has learned how little it needs to say. The distance between two Londons. In 18th century London, distance is rarely measured in miles. It is measured in permission. A few streets can separate two entirely different versions of the same city, and no map needs to explain this. People feel it the moment their steps change rhythm. The air shifts slightly. The noise rearranges itself. What was crowded becomes ordered. What demanded speed begins to demand restraint. The city does not announce the transition. It does not need to. Everyone recognizes it instinctively, like crossing an invisible line that has always been there. One London moves quickly, counting profit, time, and opportunity. The other moves slowly, counting influence, recognition, and consequence. They exist side by side without confusion because confusion would suggest overlap. There is very little overlap. The city has arranged itself so carefully that most people never need to test the boundary directly. On one side, commerce sets the pace. Movement is constant. Conversations are practical. Decisions are measured in hours and outcomes. People speak in numbers even when no numbers are mentioned. Everything here is temporary, replaceable, adjustable. If something fails, something else takes its place quickly. This part of London understands flexibility as survival. On the other side, power settles in. Buildings grow heavier, time stretches. Decisions are fewer, slower, and far more permanent. People speak less often, but when they do, their words linger. Nothing here needs to hurry because nothing here is easily undone. The city does not hide this contrast. It allows it to stand plainly, trusting that everyone will learn where they belong simply by observing how long they are allowed to stay. The difference between these Londons does not require explanation because it does not require justification. No one pretends the divide is fair. Fairness would suggest debate. The city prefers clarity. People learn early which streets welcome them and which merely tolerate their presence. Body language adjusts accordingly. Steps slow, voices lower, eyes look forward rather than around. This is not fear. It is fluency. Knowing where you are allowed to exist comfortably is a form of intelligence London values highly. Those who misunderstand this do not last long socially or professionally. The city does not punish them loudly. It simply stops responding. Doors do not open. Conversations end politely. Opportunities evaporate without confrontation. London rarely corrects mistakes directly. It lets discomfort teach instead. What makes this separation effective is how little effort it requires to maintain. No guards announce the border, no signs mark the change. Habit does the work, clothing shifts, behavior softens, expectations narrow. People carry the map inside them. Even visitors sense it, though they may not know why. They feel watched in places where nothing appears to be watching them. They feel invisible in places where they were loud moments before. London uses atmosphere as instruction. It does not need walls when posture accomplishes the same task. Power does not have to declare itself when everyone already knows where it lives. At night, the distance between the two Londons does not disappear. It sharpens. Commerce quiets but remains restless. Power grows still but never sleeps. Lamps illuminate different priorities. One side counts earnings, the other counts loyalty. People move carefully between these worlds, if they move between them at all. Most do not. Most remain where their presence feels expected. The city rewards this self-awareness. Knowing your place is not humiliation here. It is navigation. London has many streets, but very few misunderstandings about who belongs where. And in that quiet agreement, the city maintains order without ever needing to explain itself. What keeps the two Londons separate is not hostility, but agreement. An unspoken understanding passed down through observation rather than instruction. Children absorb it early. They notice which streets invite play and which demand quiet. They learn which doors are touched confidently and which are approached with hesitation. No one needs to explain the rules. Explanation would only slow the process. London trusts pattern recognition more than teaching. Over time, the city becomes legible in a very specific way. You know where to walk quickly and where to slow. You know where laughter blends in and where it echoes too loudly. The distance between worlds is maintained not by force, but by comfort. People remain where they feel most invisible or most useful, depending on what survival requires. This is not cruelty. It is efficiency, practiced for generations. Occasionally, someone crosses the boundary without intending to. A merchant wanders too close to influence. A servant passes briefly through authority. These moments rarely end dramatically. Instead, they end quietly with a subtle correction. A look held a second too long. A conversation that does not include them. A pause where an answer should have been. London does not embarrass openly. It instructs through absence. The message is clear without being spoken. This space is not yours to occupy comfortably. Most people retreat immediately, grateful for the warning. A few linger, hoping familiarity will soften the line. It rarely does. The city allows ambition, but only when it arrives properly dressed and correctly timed. Even aspiration has its address. This separation shapes how people think about success. In the commercial London, success means movement, growth, expansion, the ability to shift direction quickly. In the London of power, success means stillness, endurance, the ability to remain exactly where you are while others move around you. These definitions do not conflict because they do not compete. They operate on different clocks. Most people instinctively understand which clock governs their lives. Trying to live by the wrong one leads to exhaustion rather than advancement. London rarely corrects this mistake kindly. It lets time do the correction. Over months and years, people adjust expectations downward or sideways, settling into rhythms that match their position. The city rewards realism far more generously than hope. At night, when streets empty and movement slows, the divide becomes almost abstract. Commerce sleeps lightly, dreaming of numbers and routes. Power rests heavily, secure in permanence. Lamps glow differently in each place, illuminating purpose rather than path. People walking late sense this without fully articulating it. Steps grow cautious in one area, careless in another. Silence feels watchful here, forgiving there. London does not unify after dark. It clarifies. The city reveals itself most honestly when fewer people are watching. Boundaries become easier to feel when there is less noise to distract from them. By morning, nothing has changed. The two Londons resume their familiar distance. People return to their roles without reflection. The separation does not require maintenance because it has become habit. Habit in London is stronger than law. Knowing where you belong means knowing how to survive without constant friction. The city does not promise upward movement to everyone. It promises coherence. Each part remains legible to those who need it and distant enough from those who do not. This quiet agreement keeps the city functioning smoothly, even when it appears crowded, unequal, or restless. London understands that distance does not need to be large, to be absolute. Sometimes a few streets are more than enough. How the city slowly teaches belonging. London does not accept newcomers quickly. It does not reject them either. It simply withholds recognition. At first, the city treats you as temporary, someone passing through rather than someone who might remain. Streets do not adjust to your pace. People do not slow conversations to include you. Systems continue as if you were not there, because to London you are not there yet. This is not hostility. It is caution practiced at scale. A city that has outlasted countless arrivals does not hurry to welcome the next one. Belonging here is not granted by intention, enthusiasm, or declaration. It is granted by endurance. London waits to see who keeps returning to the same places, who learns the same routes, who stops asking why things are done a certain way, and starts doing them that way without comment. The city tests quietly, not through formal barriers, but through fatigue and repetition. The same streets demand attention day after day. The same negotiations recur with minimal variation. The same inconveniences present themselves without apology. At first, this feels punishing. Later, it feels instructive. London is not interested in how well you perform once. It is interested in how you perform when nothing changes. When the novelty has worn thin and the effort feels unrewarded, the city watches to see whether you remain. Those who leave often do so without ceremony. Those who stay stop announcing their presence. They become efficient. They learn which frustrations are worth energy and which must simply be absorbed. This learning happens slowly, almost invisibly, until one day the effort required to continue feels smaller than the effort required to leave. Belonging begins the moment surprise fades, when noise no longer startles you, when crowds feel navigable rather than overwhelming, when delays irritate you briefly instead of personally. This is not indifference, it is familiarity settling into the body. The city does not congratulate you for this transition. It barely notices. But you notice the sharp edges soften. Patterns emerge. What once felt chaotic now feels dense with meaning. You stop narrating the city to yourself and start moving through it without commentary. This is how London recognizes you indirectly. Not by name, but by behavior. You stand where you are expected to stand. You wait where waiting is required. You no longer search for exits at every inconvenience. You have, without realizing it, stayed. Survival in London is rarely dramatic. It does not arrive with triumph or relief. It arrives quietly, disguised as routine, paying rent on time, knowing which streets to avoid after dark, recognizing when a conversation is over before words announce it. These skills do not feel heroic, they feel ordinary. And that is precisely the point. London does not reward survival with praise. It rewards it with continuity. You are allowed to keep going, to occupy space without drawing attention, to exist without explanation. Over time, this permission becomes its own form of success. Not advancement, not comfort, but stability, in a city that rarely promises more than persistence. Lasting long enough becomes an achievement few bother to name. By the time you realize you belong, the city has already stopped testing you, not because you passed, but because you no longer require testing. You move with the city rather than against it. Your expectations match its rhythms. The struggle that once defined your days has been replaced by a quieter negotiation, one you barely notice anymore. London does not embrace you. It does something subtler. It allows you to remain, and in this city, that allowance is everything. Belonging is not a feeling here. It is a condition. You are no longer surprised. You are no longer temporary. You have stayed long enough for the city to stop asking whether you will leave. And when that question finally disappears, London considers the matter settled. What London offers in place of welcome is familiarity earned through repetition. You begin to recognize faces without knowing names. You anticipate interruptions before they arrive. You adjust your pace automatically, slowing where congestion forms, quickening where hesitation invites trouble. None of this feels like adaptation anymore. It feels like instinct. The city has entered your body quietly, rewriting habits rather than beliefs. You no longer ask what London expects from you. You respond before the question forms. This is how belonging settles in, not as an emotion, but as muscle memory. London does not need your affection. It needs your predictability. When you become predictable in the right ways, the city stops pushing back. Resistance fades, not because conditions improve, but because you have learned how to move within them without friction. There is a subtle shift that marks this stage. You stop measuring your days by effort and start measuring them by continuity. Another week passes, another season changes. Nothing remarkable happens, and that becomes reassuring. London rarely signals success with celebration. It signals it with absence of crisis, absence of confusion, absence of the feeling that everything might collapse at any moment. You begin to trust that tomorrow will resemble today closely enough to manage. This trust is fragile, but it is real. It allows you to plan modestly, to expect survival rather than surprise. In a city built on constant motion, learning to remain is its own quiet skill. Belonging also reshapes ambition. Early dreams soften, not because they were foolish, but because they were heavy. London teaches you which ambitions can be carried daily and which exhaust too quickly. You learn to aim for sustainability rather than transformation. The city rewards this adjustment generously, though never explicitly. Doors open more easily. Conversations extend longer. Small allowances appear where none existed before. You are no longer treated as provisional. You have demonstrated patience, and patience in London is currency. The city respects those who do not demand immediate return on effort. It trusts endurance more than enthusiasm. Over time, you notice that the city has stopped surprising you, but you have not stopped paying attention. This balance matters. Complete indifference would signal disengagement. Constant amazement would signal inexperience. Belonging exists somewhere between. You know what to expect, but you remain alert enough to respond. London thrives in this middle state. It does not require loyalty, only competence. It does not require belief, only participation. When you meet these conditions consistently, the city allows you to occupy space without explanation. That permission feels ordinary once granted, but earning it was not. By the end, survival has quietly transformed into identity. You do not announce that you belong. You simply behave as though you do. London does not confirm this verbally. It never would. Confirmation here arrives through continuity. You wake, move, work, return, and repeat without feeling out of place. The city has tested you with fatigue, repetition, and indifference, and you have responded by remaining. That is enough. In London, staying long enough becomes a form of success, so understated it almost disappears. Almost, but not quite. The city notices, and in its own quiet way, it lets you stay. When the city finally lets you sleep. London does not soften at night. It does not lower its voice, dim its intentions, or pause to check whether you are ready to rest. The wheels still turn somewhere. Footsteps still echo. Water still moves beneath bridges carrying stories you will never hear. The city remains exactly as awake as it was before you arrived. The difference now is not London, it is you. Sleep comes not because the city allows it, but because your body has learned how to exist inside the noise without answering it. Muscles relax not from comfort, but from familiarity. The mind stops scanning for danger, not because danger has disappeared, but because you know how to recognize it without panic. London keeps going. You simply stop following it for a while. There is something quietly ironic about this. After all the chaos, all the movement, all the adaptation, rest does not arrive as a reward. It arrives as a truce you sign with yourself. You lie down knowing the streets are still crowded somewhere, that bargains are still being made, that lamps are still burning, that someone else is beginning their day as yours ends. London does not care that you are sleeping. And somehow, that indifference feels peaceful. Tomorrow offers no promise, no improvement is guaranteed, nothing resets overnight. The smells will return, the routines will repeat, the city will continue being exactly what it has always been, and that, strangely, is the comfort. Predictability replaces hope, continuity replaces reassurance. You are no longer waiting for London to change. You are simply participating, then stepping aside when you need to. This is how the city finally lets you sleep, not by becoming kind, but by becoming known, by losing its sharp edges through repetition, by teaching you that survival does not always require alertness, only endurance. The city stays awake. You close your eyes. Both things can be true at the same time. So for now, rest. Let the sounds fade without needing to understand them. Let the day loosen its grip. London will still be there when you wake. It always is. Good night.